Today, on January 11th, we're talking about what it looks like to actually live out a belief in God, in Source. Is it just about learning about God? Is it just learning about Source or learning mystical things? Or is there something more to it?
Hi, I'm Candy. I'm a hypnotherapist who's deconstructing from evangelical Christianity, and I know how mindset shapes our behavior. So, in this series, I'm going to share my daily reflections from 3 different devotionals. The Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo, and that one's a little more spiritual, non religious. Also, Jesus Calling by Sarah Young, which is a very modern Christian approach. And My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers, which is a very classic Christian angle. My goal is to help you see how each one of these devotionals or these day books might shape your mindset a little differently. And if you're into that kind of reflection, please like and follow for more. Let's get started.
So, for January 11th in the Book of Awakening, Mark tells a story about a man who was in he was in divinity school, and he was stricken with polio sometime during that. He was a young kid, and somewhere deep inside him, he had this urge, this desire, this still small voice calling to him to dance. Of all things, it was dance. And he struggled with that, and eventually he listened to it. He quit divinity school and he began to dance, and slowly and miraculously his legs began to work again, and he went on to become one of the fathers of modern dance. So I think his name was Ted Shawn, and his point is that studying God is not what healed him. It was actually embodying what he believed. And then he talks about this deep voice, this still small voice, I think I use that because that is used in the Bible, but it's this thing that pulls us, this calling or this desire. And when we follow it, and it's not just one, you might have several in your life, or, there might be something deep down that you have this pull towards, and yet you resist it because you think you cannot do it, or you just have busied your life so much that you can't hear it. And it's not to obey some rules. It's a calling to what you actually, your deepest desires. There's a verse in the Bible that I believe it's in Psalms where it says, He will give you the desires of your heart. And I used to think about that verse when I was a kid, and it was one of my favorites. And everybody understood it in that He will put His desires in your heart. And I didn't understand it that way. I understood it that what my desires are, He will give me. And I think that's a much healthier way of looking at it. And I still believe that my desires of my heart that are mine, that if I pursue them, I can have them. So another point he makes is that when you have an obstacle in your way, you can love it until it ceases to be an obstacle and it can become an ally. And so I have a little story I want to share about how when I was at hypnosis school, one of the things they taught us was to, when you're in a situation that you do not want to be in, but you have no control over it, it's you don't like it, to start saying to yourself in your mind or out loud, even if you want to, I like this, I like this, I like this. And what it will do is get the subconscious to kind of go, oh, we like this. So it starts looking around for things to like. So it will find things in that environment that you're in that you do like, and it can help reframe things. So what's interesting is the day of that class where that was shared with us, a very unpleasant thing happened. And I had just been to that class and I used it and it worked. It really worked. It just changed the whole situation so that my mind looked at it from a different angle, and it was beautiful. So that is what I would kind of recommend that you try when you're in a situation. A lot of people say that they value things. You hear Christians say that they value a lot of things. They'll say they value life, and yet they don't in many situations. Not all life, and it does seem like, I know some people are saying that they're more pro birth rather than pro life when it comes to like pregnancy and that kind of stuff. And it does appear that way. They're also pro death penalty a lot of times, and that's not life. And sometimes I think they're just pro life, like just life, but it doesn't have to be quality of life. And to me, it's important that I have quality of life. I do not want to be on this planet if I don't have quality of life at all. I would rather, if I have the option of, if I have zero quality, like I cannot open my eyes or talk to anybody, or like I'm in like a coma state and there's no chance of me coming out, like, yeah, I, pull the plug. But I still remember a case with, I think it was Terry Shriver or something like that, when I was a kid. And the husband wanted to pull the plug, and because she was like in this state where she was just brain dead basically, and they didn't want the family didn't. And I was at a Christian school at the time, and they painted the parents and the family in such a beautiful light. They're the Christians, he's not. They would say things, I don't know if any of it's true, I have no idea, like he had another woman already and stuff. But I actually think, looking back, he was doing the most humane thing. But that's not what I was taught at that time. And I know this isn't about like physical, that kind of stuff. But they say they value life, and then they don't. They want kids to come into the world, but if you got to give them, food stamps or free health care, and they've got to help pay for it, yeah, they don't want that. And I'm associating Christians, obviously, the ones I was a part of were anti-democrat. You could not be a Democrat and be a Christian. You had to be conservative, and the conservative views were, no welfare of any sort, no free health care, anything that would take money out of their pockets, they weren't going to, contribute to or be okay with. I'm not saying all Christians are like that, but that's the type of Christianity that I grew up around. So they say one thing and then they show a different thing. Their lives are shaped by these rules that they interpret in the Bible, or their leaders tell them. They live in fear of, there's always an enemy out there to get them. They teach that to their children, which puts them in fear. And they don't embody that love that they proclaim. They're not known by their love. Evangelical Christians are not known by their love. And that's what Jesus said, how you would know if someone was his follower, it would be by their love for one another. And then Christians will twist that, and they'll say the love for other Christians, not for just brotherly love for anyone. So that is not what actually helps you heal, by saying you believe a certain thing or even believing it. You have to act on that belief. So faith without works is dead. So you can't just believe something and not act on it. The actions that you take from your beliefs show. So the actions are louder than the words. In Jesus Calling, I really definitely tried to get all of these to have some sort of cohesive topic, but today they're all over the place. So in Jesus Calling, it's about praying once and then thanking God for the answer and not continuing to ask, because that creates tension. And maybe she didn't say this, but taking the other days into account, it would probably kind of appear to be that you don't trust God, and that gratitude will just keep you focused on God's presence and his promises. And while gratitude can be really grounding, because it can be, it's really healthy, that it can also become spiritually bypassing with this way of thinking, because it just quiets distress instead of like addressing it. If there's a problem going on that needs to be talked about, it needs to be talked about, and maybe more than once until it's solved. Instead, basically telling people to just trust that God's got it, pray about it, and it can suppress questions and doubts and concerns, and that's just not healthy at all. Sometimes the better thing to do is just sit and talk about it, feel it with them, be present with somebody who's suffering. And I know that Sarah Young wasn't intending for that. She was intending to bring comfort. I believe that's what her intention was. But in Christianity, that's the thing. They want you to, it takes them so long to change their minds when something's not working, when people call it out and they show the hypocrisy or they show the contradictions, and it takes forever, it seems like, for them to admit, oh yeah, that doesn't work. And they finally come around decades. I mean, it's happened throughout history. The church took forever to believe that the earth was actually revolving around the sun and not the other way around, or that it wasn't flat. So that kind of stuff. I get not, when it comes to something that you have no control over, putting that out into the universe, a desire that you have, and then not something that's like stressing you at the moment, maybe. That's very difficult to do. That's a lot of burden on somebody who's actually really seeking help. Oh, you can't talk about it, just pray about it, but putting something out like a desire, a dream that you have, and then just moving on and not stressing over it, but knowing it'll come at some point, I can see some real benefit to that. But when it comes to like day-to-day matters, or where there's abuse or something happening, like, you can't just use this kind of thing. It doesn't work. And yet you see it being used all the time to spiritually bypass. And for my utmost for his highest, this is an interesting one. So today his focus is kind of on the cost of obedience, that your obedience to God will be lovely and delightful to you, enjoyable. But your obedience is going to cost others more than it costs you. And they're going to be like, you call this Christianity, and they're going to be suffering, and you could end their suffering by disobeying God and just trying to end their suffering. But you got to obey God regardless of the impact and leave the consequences to God. Now, this just completely displaces the responsibility and things. Their harm is almost spiritualized, like it's good that you've harmed others. And you can see this play out in certain types of Christianity for sure. Empathy is kind of dulled and it's considered weak. Faith is considered, you comply with what we believe to be right and true. We, as the leaders, this is what the Bible says. When there's other leaders that would interpret that differently, other people that would interpret it differently, but under that church and that system, you have to follow their rules, and they have the corner on God, which they will, a lot of these churches claim, and it's going to cause people to suffer, but you might enjoy it, which you probably will, because you're going to be loving. And I've seen people completely destroy and leave their families for this, and then cling to, this is for God. It's insane. Because they don't, it's just, it's sad. It seems like mental health is at play if someone can do that. But then you have the leaders who use it to just get what they want done, and the consequences, like the others suffering, to be damned. Who cares? It's not. And so when you tie like Christianity, that version of Christianity, to politics, and you can abuse it to like have others suffer and be like, I'm sorry, oh well, because we have to follow God. But it's not God, it's their version of God, a God made in their own image. That's really what it is. And that's why I find the Book of Awakening so beautiful, where it's like, live out what you actually believe. And in some ways, people are, deep down, they believe that God is vindictive. God is kind of cruel. He's only going to accept some and he's going to burn the rest. So they kind of act that way in their life. Like, you should be punished extreme, overboard for your crime, and little things are crimes. Kind of like in the Bible, where there's little things, like if you touch a dead insect, that was considered like you were unclean. So kind of like a sin in the Old Testament. So things like that. So, and ironically, the time I lost the most was when I began to deconstruct and follow truth. It was hard for others, but I couldn't go back. Even though the misery of losing people, losing relationships because they didn't want anything to do with me anymore because I wasn't Christian, I was gaining freedom. I was happy again. I felt like my questions were getting answered. I felt a sense of purpose again, and I could dream again for myself. Like, what do I want to do and be? And it changed radically. And with those who actually stayed with me through it, like, we have much better relationships, and we've, formed new relationships with others. And some of the old relationships have kind of come back around and seen that they can love me even though I'm not Christian anymore. And I really appreciate those people. Some of them still very much Christian. They're just not hardcore like I was, and like evangelical, at least especially fundamentalist Christians. So that's all three of those. In Book of Awakening, the truth will heal you as you embody it. In the Jesus Calling, it's basically, just trust God. Stop bitching about your problems. Tell him once and then just keep trusting. And then in my utmost, it's basically your obedience is more important than anything. And whoever suffers, but you'll probably be good. So take what resonates and leave the rest.
Remember, you get to decide what you devote your thinking to today. You might not be able to control every thought that comes in, but you can definitely decide what you entertain. And whether it comes from something I've said today or something completely different, choose wisely and set an intention that truly benefits you and those around you. And if you found any value here today, don't forget to like and follow. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and let's keep our minds on what helps us love ourselves and each other a little bit better every day.